The courthouse stood tall and solemn, its stone facade bathed in the soft golden light of a late spring morning. Inside, the atmosphere was a mixture of routine and subtle tension, the kind that always accompanied a busy day of hearings. Lawyers shuffled papers, clerks adjusted their glasses, and the faint scent of coffee lingered in the hallways. In the center of this controlled chaos, a 3-year-old girl named Lily held tightly onto her mother's hand, her small frame almost swallowed by the towering benches around her. Her eyes, wide with wonder, darted from one corner of the room to another, absorbing everything with a curiosity that was both innocent and intense. Lily's mother, Sarah, adjusted her daughter's little pink bow and smiled down at her. "Stay close, honey," she whispered, bending low so that Lily could hear over the murmurs of the courtroom. Lily nodded, though her attention had already wandered. Today was not just another morning in court, it was special. For the first time, a police K-9 unit had been invited to the courthouse, their presence intended for a brief demonstration of tracking and obedience skills. But for Lily, it was a world full of magic waiting to unfold. The officers arrived promptly, their uniforms crisp and polished, boots clicking against the polished marble floors. With them was Max, a German shepherd whose reputation preceded him. The dog moved with a mixture of grace and authority, his coat gleaming under the courtroom lights, his eyes alert and intelligent. A black vest marked him clearly as a police dog, the emblem of his service stitched into the fabric. Lily's jaw dropped slightly as she watched him. There was something about Max's calm demeanor, combined with his obvious strength, that made him larger than life in her eyes. The courtroom staff arranged the space, ensuring Max had enough room to maneuver safely. Judges, clerks, and spectators alike took note of the unusual addition to the day's proceedings. Lily, however, was oblivious to the formalities. She was entirely captivated by Max, standing on her mother's lap to get a better view. Her tiny fingers reached out, though of course the rules prevented her from getting too close. She whispered softly, "Hi, doggy," barely audible over the shuffle of papers and quiet conversations. Sarah couldn't help but smile, brushing a stray lock of hair from Lily's face. Her daughter had always been drawn to animals, but the intensity with which she studied Max was remarkable. As the judge took his seat and called the court to order, Lily's focus never wavered. Around them, the room settled into the rhythm of a typical hearing. Lawyers presented documents, witnesses murmured their names and addresses, and the clerk read the case summary in her clear, deliberate voice. Yet, despite the procedural proceedings, the presence of Max created an undercurrent of excitement, almost palpable in the air. Lily's eyes followed every movement of the dog, noting the subtle way he shifted his weight, the twitch of his ears, and the way his tail remained calm and controlled. Max's handlers knelt beside him occasionally, giving gentle commands. "Sit, stay, heel." Each word was met with immediate compliance, a testament to the rigorous training that had made him a dependable member of the police force. For the adults, it was impressive. For Lily, it was magical. Her tiny hands clenched the edge of her mother's skirt as she watched him move, imagining the heroic adventures he must have undertaken outside these walls. She leaned closer, whispering again, "Good boy," her voice filled with awe. Even the officers couldn't help but notice the intensity of her gaze, a reminder of how the smallest observers often see what adults overlook. The courtroom itself was a mix of reactions. Some of the attendees found the situation mildly amusing, exchanging soft chuckles at the sight of a toddler so fascinated by a dog during a hearing. Others were intrigued, glancing over occasionally, sensing that something unusual was afoot. It wasn't every day that a K-9 unit appeared in the middle of a legal proceeding, and even fewer times did someone react with such raw, innocent attention. The tension of legal arguments softened slightly in the background as Max remained poised, a silent symbol of courage and reliability amidst the formalities of justice. As the proceedings began in earnest, Lily grew more animated. She shifted in her mother's lap, pointing subtly at Max, whispering questions only she could articulate. Sarah tried to gently redirect her attention, but she could see the spark in her daughter's eyes, the pure fascination that refused to be diverted. The officers gave each other knowing looks, accustomed to children being drawn to their K-9 partners, yet something about Lily's focus felt different. It was as if she understood, in her own small way, the gravity of the dog's role, the quiet heroism he represented in the community. Moments stretched, and Lily's fascination only deepened. She pressed a tiny hand against the bench, peering at Max as if memorizing every detail. The sheen of his coat, the intelligence in his eyes, the slight twitch of his ears, all of it captivated her completely. Around her, the room's attention was divided. Some focused on the ongoing case, some on the dog, and some on the little girl whose presence seemed to magnify the significance of the animal's demonstration. As the morning light streamed through the tall windows, casting soft patterns on the marble floor, the ordinary courthouse transformed, if only for a moment. What had begun as a routine hearing had quietly become a stage for an unspoken connection between a child and a police dog. Observers couldn't yet understand the depth of what was about to happen, but a sense of anticipation hovered, like the calm before a gentle storm. Lily, innocent and unaware of the attention she commanded, leaned in a little closer, her gaze locked on Max, the hero she had already chosen in her mind. Even as the judge's gavel signaled the official start of proceedings, the real story, quiet, unassuming, and entirely unexpected, was unfolding in the lap of a 3-year-old girl. It was a story of curiosity, innocence, and the subtle ways in which heroism can be recognized, even by the youngest among us. And in that ordinary courthouse, with its stone walls and polished benches, the extraordinary had begun. The courtroom seemed to hold its collective breath as Max, the German shepherd, positioned himself near the judge's bench. His presence alone commanded attention, his muscular frame coiled like a spring ready to act, yet his posture radiated calm authority. Officers knelt beside him, their hands resting gently on his broad shoulders, whispering quiet commands. "Stay, heel, focus." Max responded instantly, a picture of obedience, intelligence, and silent strength. Even the most distracted spectator could see that this was no ordinary dog. He was a trained protector, a partner in law enforcement, and now, unwittingly, the center of a young girl's fascination. Lily, still perched on her mother's lap, leaned forward, her tiny fingers gripping the edge of the bench. Her eyes widened with awe as she observed Max shift effortlessly from sitting to standing, responding to each command with precision. The subtle movements, the flick of his ears, the slight wag of his tail, the disciplined yet fluid steps were mesmerizing to her. She whispered, "Good doggy," so softly it was almost lost among the murmurs of the courtroom, but Sarah heard it and smiled, brushing a lock of hair from Lily's face. Her daughter's fascination was palpable, a mixture of admiration, curiosity, and something deeper, a recognition of courage she didn't yet fully understand. The officers began a demonstration of Max's skills. They had prepared a series of exercises designed to show both obedience and practical utility in law enforcement scenarios. First came tracking. An officer took a small item, a scarf that had a distinct scent, and let it drop subtly near a corner of the courtroom. Max's nose twitched, his breathing measured, as he bent low to the floor and began to trace the scent with methodical precision. Lily's eyes followed every movement, her small hand reaching instinctively toward the dog. "He's finding it," she exclaimed under her breath, her voice a mix of excitement and awe. As Max located the item in moments, the courtroom erupted in quiet applause. Even the judge allowed a small smile to break through his normally serious expression. Lily clapped her hands softly, delighted, as if she had personally witnessed a miracle. The other children in the audience gawked, some whispering among themselves, but none were as captivated as Lily. She leaned closer to Sarah, whispering, "He's so smart." Sarah nodded, her heart swelling at the innocence and enthusiasm in her daughter's voice. The next demonstration was obedience under distraction. Max had to maintain focus while other officers moved around, papers shuffled, and the general chaos of the courtroom resumed. The dog remained calm, ignoring the noise, perfectly attentive to his handler's commands. Lily's fascination grew. She tilted her head, studying Max's every muscle, his controlled breathing, and the way his eyes seemed to read not just commands, but the intentions behind them. For Lily, this was no longer a simple demonstration. It was a lesson in courage, discipline, and loyalty, embodied in a single animal. As the demonstration continued, Max was asked to perform protection exercises. A volunteer officer stepped forward, wearing a padded suit, simulating a suspect in need of restraint. Max moved with controlled precision, stopping only at the command of his handler. Lily gasped, pressing her hands to her mouth in awe. She whispered, "Wow, he's brave," and for the first time some of the adults around her noticed her focused attention. It was a quiet moment, yet profound. Here was a tiny human, barely 3 years old, intuitively recognizing the courage and heroism displayed in front of her. The officers then allowed Max a moment to interact with the audience in a controlled, safe way. He approached Lily, who extended a trembling hand. Max lowered his head, sniffed carefully, and allowed the small fingers to brush his coat. Lily giggled, a pure, musical sound that seemed to light up the room. Even the sternest lawyer looked away briefly, momentarily distracted by the innocence and joy radiating from the interaction. Max, despite his disciplined training, seemed to sense the reverence in Lily's gaze, the unique connection that only children sometimes evoke in animals. Whispers rippled across the courtroom. Some adults exchanged amused smiles, charmed by Lily's obvious enchantment. Others watched with quiet admiration, recognizing that this moment transcended the ordinary boundaries of court proceedings. For a brief time, the seriousness of law documents and legal arguments faded into the background. Max, the hero dog, and Lily, the innocent witness, had become the heart of the room. The officers exchanged glances, acknowledging the rare magic of the moment. A trained police dog rarely receives acknowledgement like this in a formal setting, yet here it was, coming from a tiny voice filled with unfiltered wonder. As the morning wore on, Lily's attention never wavered. She observed every subtle detail, the way Max shifted his weight, how his eyes followed his handler's movements, and the gentle wag of his tail when acknowledged. She whispered observations under her breath. "Look, Mommy, he listens, he's so big." Sarah listened, laughing quietly, grateful that her daughter was safe but also captivated by such a profound connection. Even the judge allowed a small nod of approval, recognizing that the child's engagement was not disruptive but meaningful, a reminder of the human capacity for admiration and awe, even in unexpected places. Max's demonstration concluded with a final display of tracking and obedience, navigating through a small obstacle course the officers had arranged within the courtroom. Each step was precise, measured, and confident. Lily's hands clapped instinctively, her voice calling out, "Yay, good boy." The officers smiled, proud not only of Max's performance but also of the impact it had on the young witness before them. The courtroom, once a place of strict procedure and reserved decorum, had been transformed into a space where bravery, trust, and innocence intersected. As the officers concluded their demonstration and Max returned to a sitting position near the judge's bench, Lily leaned forward one last time, her gaze locked on the dog. There was a quiet intensity in her expression, a mix of admiration, recognition, and perhaps the first spark of understanding of what it means to be a hero. Sarah held her close, whispering, "Isn't he amazing?" Lily nodded solemnly, her small voice barely above a whisper, "My hero." At that moment, though none in the courtroom could yet fully comprehend it, the stage was set for a moment that would ripple far beyond the courthouse walls, a moment in which innocence, courage, and recognition collided in a single, unforgettable declaration. The morning, once routine, had now been transformed into an extraordinary encounter. Max, the police dog, had shown skill, courage, and intelligence. Lily, the 3-year-old girl, had responded with unfiltered wonder and recognition. In this small-town courthouse, a connection had been forged, a bridge between the disciplined bravery of a trained animal and the pure, honest admiration of a child. As the judge prepared to continue the proceedings, no one could ignore the subtle shift in energy in the room. Something had changed. The ordinary had become extraordinary, and everyone present sensed that they were witnessing the beginning of a story they would never forget. After Max's demonstration, the courtroom gradually settled into a quieter rhythm. The judge tapped his gavel lightly, signaling the official continuation of the day's proceedings. Lawyers shuffled papers, witnesses murmured their names and addresses, and the clerk read the case summary in her precise, practiced voice. From the outside, it seemed like any other day of court, formal, serious, and procedural. But in the small section of the courtroom where Sarah and Lily sat, a quiet tension lingered, the kind born from anticipation rather than anxiety. Lily's attention never wavered from Max, the police dog who had already captured her fascination hours before. Lily shifted in her mother's lap, trying to get a better view of the dog. Her tiny fingers traced imaginary patterns on the edge of the bench as she whispered softly, "Look, Mommy, he's so big, he's so strong." Sarah smiled, but remained focused on keeping her daughter seated and attentive. She knew children were naturally curious, but she couldn't ignore the intensity in Lily's gaze. It was as if the girl understood something deeper, an unspoken recognition of heroism and courage that adults often overlooked. Lily's whispers were not disruptive. Instead, they carried a raw innocence that seemed to make the courtroom air feel lighter, almost magical. Max sat near the judge's bench, obedient and alert, occasionally glancing at his handler for instruction. Despite the seriousness of the proceedings, he remained a silent guardian, aware of the eyes upon him. Lily's fascination seemed to grow with every passing minute. She tilted her head, observing the way his ears twitched at faint sound, the subtle flex of his muscle, the steady rhythm of his breathing. She whispered more observations under her breath. "He listens, he knows what to do." Occasionally, her words were barely audible, yet they carried an authenticity that cut through the rigid formality of the courtroom. The judge began calling witnesses, each statement measured, deliberate, and carefully documented. Lawyers presented their evidence, cross-examined witnesses, and referenced legal precedents, all in the hushed tones and formal cadence expected in court. Yet through all the proceedings, Lily's gaze never strayed from Max. She leaned slightly forward in her mother's lap, her eyes fixed and bright, absorbing both the seriousness of the courtroom and the quiet, disciplined bravery of the dog beside the bench. Her fascination was palpable, a magnetic force drawing the attention of anyone who noticed. Several officers glanced down at Lily, sensing the intensity of her focus. Max remained composed, sensing the small human's attention without reacting dramatically. It was a silent, almost sacred moment, a 3-year-old girl observing, analyzing, and admiring a trained hero with a clarity that few adults could muster. Sarah whispered to her, "Be gentle, honey, Max is working." And Lily nodded, her tiny hand pressed against her chest as though she understood the gravity of the canine's presence. Proceedings continued with the introduction of exhibits. Lawyers presented documents, photographs, and statements, all part of a larger case that had brought the town together. Witnesses took the stand, recounting events in their own words, and the courtroom maintained its usual mixture of quiet attention and subtle tension. But Lily remained focused elsewhere. She pointed occasionally at Max, her finger trembling slightly with excitement, and whispered observations that only she could hear. "He's brave. He could save someone." Sarah smiled knowingly, realizing that her daughter's imagination and intuition were connecting threads of courage she had not yet articulated in words. Other spectators began to notice Lily's fixation. Some exchanged amused glances, whispering quietly to each other, "Look at that little girl, she's so captivated by the dog." Others shook their heads, smiling at the innocence and focus in her tiny gestures. Yet a few, more observant, sensed that Lily's attention carried a weight beyond childish curiosity. It was a subtle recognition, a respect for the bravery represented in Max's disciplined posture and controlled movements. The courtroom had transformed, shifting imperceptibly from a space of formal law to a place where courage, admiration, and human-animal connection quietly intersected. As the morning stretched on, Lily became increasingly animated. She leaned forward, resting her chin on the edge of the bench, her eyes tracking Max as he shifted his weight slightly to follow the subtle movements of his handler. She whispered, "He's watching, he's listening, he's ready." The adults nearby noticed her murmurs but dismissed them initially as innocent observation. Yet, the intensity in her gaze, the precision of her focus, made it clear that she was absorbing more than the average toddler might. This was no longer simple curiosity. It was understanding, or at least the earliest spark of comprehension of courage and responsibility. During a brief pause in proceedings, the courtroom seemed to collectively exhale. Lawyers adjusted their notes, the clerk shuffled documents, and the judge allowed the room a moment of stillness before continuing. Lily, however, remained entranced. She leaned slightly toward Max, whispering softly, "You're a good boy, you're so strong." Her words were innocent, almost imperceptible, yet they carried an authenticity that made the officers and several spectators glance down with interest. Max, sensing attention and affection, tilted his head slightly, his dark eyes meeting Lily's, a silent acknowledgement passing between them. The courtroom, normally a place of strict procedure and solemnity, had been subtly transformed. A connection had been forged between a tiny human and a trained hero. Adults, engrossed in legal formalities, began to notice the emotional undercurrent in the room. The tension of the proceedings remained, but there was now an added layer, a quiet, almost sacred acknowledgement of courage and admiration, embodied in Lily's gaze and Max's silent presence. Sarah, sensing the growing attention her daughter commanded, whispered a gentle reminder, "Stay close, honey, we're still in court," but allowed Lily's fascination to continue unabated. Time seemed to stretch as proceedings continued, each witness and piece of evidence adding weight to the legal case while simultaneously highlighting the ongoing, unspoken drama unfolding between child and dog. Lily's whispers continued, "He's brave, he could help someone," words simple, yet profound in their sincerity. The courtroom felt alive with quiet anticipation, the mundane proceedings now punctuated by the subtle but undeniable gravity of a child's recognition. Every subtle shift of Max's ears, every flex of his muscles, every blink of his intelligent eyes was absorbed by Lily, as if she were committing the hero's actions to memory for a moment that had yet to fully arrive. And in that moment, as the judge prepared to call the next witness and lawyers adjusted their notes, it became increasingly clear that something remarkable was about to happen. Lily's unwavering attention, the quiet admiration in her voice, and the silent acknowledgement from Max created a tension that resonated throughout the courtroom. Adults sensed it but could not articulate it, only feel it. The ordinary morning of legal procedure had quietly morphed into a stage where innocence, admiration, and courage intersected, setting the scene for a declaration that would stop everyone in their tracks. Lily's small hands pressed against the bench, her voice soft but certain. Her attention remained locked on Max, the police dog who had already demonstrated skill, courage, and discipline. For her, this was not merely a demonstration, it was a living example of heroism. The courtroom, caught between the formalities of law and the raw purity of a child's perspective, seemed to pause. In those final moments before the next witness took the stand, the anticipation in the air was almost tangible, as if everyone present subconsciously understood that a moment of innocence and recognition was about to reshape the ordinary day into something unforgettable. The courtroom had settled into its routine rhythm once again. Lawyers were reviewing notes, the judge's gavel punctuated the proceedings, and witnesses recounted their statements in precise, careful tones. It was an ordinary morning on the surface, yet beneath the layers of legal formalities, an extraordinary tension had quietly been building. Everyone had noticed the little girl perched on her mother's lap, 3-year-old Lily, whose gaze had not wavered from Max, the German Shepherd police dog who had captured her imagination hours earlier. But no one anticipated what was about to happen, a moment that would stop the entire courtroom in its tracks. Lily had been leaning slightly forward, tiny hands pressed against the polished bench, eyes wide with intensity. Her whispers had become more deliberate, almost rehearsed in their simplicity. "He listens, he's brave, he's strong." Sarah glanced down, brushing a strand of hair from her daughter's face, smiling softly. She thought Lily was merely expressing fascination, a natural curiosity that children often displayed. Yet Sarah could sense a quiet determination in Lily's posture, a focus that went beyond innocent interest. This was different. Lily's small body vibrated with unspoken energy, a tension only a child could carry when on the cusp of revelation. Max remained calm, standing beside his handler. His ears twitched at faint sounds, his dark eyes alert and observant. He had been trained for obedience, protection, and heroism, yet he seemed attuned to the subtle cues from the child in the audience. Lily's presence created a unique connection, one that the officers, accustomed to routine K-9 demonstrations, rarely witnessed. She was more than an observer. She was a participant in the silent dialogue between bravery and recognition. The room, oblivious to the storm brewing, carried on with its mundane procedures. Then, in a moment of stillness, Lily leaned forward a little further. Her tiny finger pointed directly at Max, unwavering and precise. The courtroom, filled with adults immersed in legal proceedings, did not immediately notice the significance of the gesture. But the moment stretched, as if time itself had paused to accommodate the child's actions. Her eyes locked onto Max's intelligent gaze, and for the first time, her lips moved clearly enough for everyone in the immediate vicinity to hear. Two words, spoken with unfiltered sincerity, broke the rhythm of the courtroom entirely. "My hero." The effect was instantaneous. The judge, mid-sentence, froze, gavel raised but unstruck. Lawyers paused mid-note, some leaning back in disbelief. Spectators turned toward the source of the interruption, and a hush fell over the room. Even the officers who handled Max instinctively stopped, unsure of how to respond. Max himself tilted his head, eyes meeting Lily, as if acknowledging her words. He remained composed, but a subtle wag of his tail betrayed an almost imperceptible understanding. The entire courtroom had been struck by something far more powerful than legal arguments or procedural formalities. It was the raw, undeniable truth of admiration, distilled into two small words from a child. Whispers erupted almost immediately, soft murmurs rippling across the benches. Did she just say, "My hero"? She meant Max. Some smiled, others chuckled softly, but many were silent, moved by the simplicity and depth of the moment. The room, previously defined by routine, had transformed into a space where innocence and heroism intersected, where a child's voice carried the weight of truth that adults could recognize but never articulate so purely. Sarah felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes, overwhelmed by the profound impact of Lily's observation. She gently held her daughter, realizing that these two words were more than cute commentary. They were acknowledgement of bravery that resonated through the courtroom. The judge, regaining composure, adjusted his robe and looked down at the tiny girl. There was a softness in his expression, a rare departure from the strict professionalism he carried daily. "Do you see how remarkable that dog is, young lady?" he asked gently, nodding toward Max. Lily nodded solemnly, eyes still wide with admiration. She whispered softly again, more to herself than anyone else, "Brave doggy." The courtroom responded to the first two words, but it was the sincerity in her tone, the depth of her observation, that kept the entire room riveted. The officers, initially unsure of how to react, exchanged glances. Max had performed countless demonstrations, been praised and rewarded in formal settings, but never had he received recognition so pure, so immediate, and so innocent. One officer, trying to maintain composure, whispered quietly to a colleague, "She sees him the way we wish everyone could." Others nodded silently, aware that this was a rare, almost sacred acknowledgement, a reminder of why they served and trained heroes like Max every day. The dog had become more than an instrument of law. He was, in that instant, a symbol of courage acknowledged by the purest form of honesty, the eyes and voice of a child. The spectators, some of whom had been quietly skeptical of the K-9 demonstration, now found themselves absorbed entirely in the unfolding moment. A mother sitting several rows behind Sarah whispered to her companion, "Look at her. She understands something adults can't even put into words." A lawyer murmured 2 words, and she stopped everything. Even the judge paused, reflecting on the unexpected power of innocence and observation. The courtroom, once defined by procedure and decorum, had become a theater of emotional truth. Lily, sensing the attention but unaware of the impact, continued to observe Max. Her eyes glimmered with curiosity and admiration, her small chest rising and falling with quiet excitement. Max remained still, attentive to his handler, yet the subtle connection between child and dog seemed almost tangible. It was a moment that transcended the boundaries of age, authority, and procedure. Here, bravery and innocence had collided, and the world felt suspended in acknowledgement of that truth. For Sarah, it was a reminder of the profound simplicity of childhood insight. Her daughter, barely 3 years old, had distilled admiration and respect into a single, heartfelt statement. Adults around her could only watch, realizing that the courtroom, with all its formalities and rules, had witnessed something far more powerful than any argument or evidence could convey. The words, "my hero," reverberated silently through the room, leaving an indelible impression on everyone present. Max, ever aware and disciplined, seemed to sense the significance as well. His tail wagged slowly, a gentle acknowledgement of the child's words. The officers allowed the moment to linger, recognizing the rare combination of innocence, perception, and bravery that had converged in their presence. Even as the judge prepared to continue the proceedings, the atmosphere had changed permanently. No one could return fully to the business of law. The courtroom had been touched by something profound, something entirely human and entirely extraordinary. The moment lingered long enough for every observer to feel it, yet brief enough to leave a sense of longing and awe. Lily's 2 words had captured a truth about heroism, courage, and recognition that the adults in the room could only admire. In the midst of a routine morning, amidst documents, legal arguments, and procedural formalities, a child had spoken the language of sincerity, and a dog had quietly received the acknowledgement he deserved. As the courtroom slowly resumed its rhythm, the air was still charged. Spectators whispered to one another, replaying the moment silently in their minds. Lawyers adjusted their papers, but their eyes betrayed that they were still reflecting on the tiny voice that had commanded attention. The judge, clearing his throat, smiled softly, a rare show of emotion. "Let's proceed," he said, but the words were tempered with understanding. Even as the legal matters continued, the resonance of Lily's declaration lingered, a reminder that moments of pure admiration can transcend the most structured environments. Sarah hugged her daughter gently, whispering, "You were very brave, honey." Lily giggled, her eyes still fixed on Max, unaware of the impact her simple words had caused. Max remained calm but alert, the embodiment of discipline and heroism, now recognized in the most profound and innocent way possible. The courtroom had been forever changed, its participants reminded that courage is sometimes best honored by the simplest, most sincere words. As the echoes of Lily's words faded, a stillness settled over the courtroom, but curiosity lingered like a soft hum. Adults exchanged glances, whispering quietly among themselves, attempting to piece together why the declaration had resonated so powerfully. "My hero," she had said so effortlessly, yet with a gravity that seemed impossible for a 3-year-old. Max, the German shepherd, sat attentively beside his handler, seemingly aware that his quiet heroism had been recognized. It was at that moment that the officers felt compelled to explain, in whispers, the story behind the dog's recent acts of bravery, a story that had touched the entire community. The tale began several weeks earlier, in a wooded area on the outskirts of town. A toddler from a nearby neighborhood had wandered away from her home during a morning playtime, her small footprints lost in the dense underbrush. Panic had spread quickly among the child's family and local residents, who called the police in desperation. Max had been deployed immediately, alongside his handler, trained to navigate the most difficult terrain, tracking scents with precision and focus that few humans could match. His mission was clear: locate the lost child before danger escalated. The search had been arduous. Twisting trails, dense foliage, and uneven terrain made every step a challenge. Yet Max moved with confidence and intelligence, his nose tracing the faintest hints of the child's scent. Hours passed, tension rising with every moment as the community watched and prayed. Finally, Max located the toddler near a small creek, frightened but unharmed. The rescue was swift and efficient, a perfect display of training, instinct, and bravery. When the child was returned safely to her parents, the town erupted with relief and gratitude. Max's heroism was celebrated locally, with officers praised for their skill and the dog lauded for his incredible service. In the courtroom now, Lily had heard fragments of this story indirectly. Her daycare friend had been the child rescued by Max, and even at 3 years old, Lily had absorbed enough to connect the dog before her with the hero of local lore. While adults debated legal statutes and examined evidence, Lily's observation had distilled the essence of bravery into 2 simple words: my hero. Her connection wasn't just fascination, it was recognition, an intuitive understanding of what it meant to act courageously for the sake of others. Max, though unaware of the courtroom's formalities, had received acknowledgement in its purest form. The spectators in the courtroom, upon learning the context, began to react in waves. Some gasped softly, touched by the fact that the child had understood the dog's heroism in a way that many adults might never fully grasp. Lawyers paused, glancing up from their documents, appreciating the significance of the moment. Even the judge, normally reserved and methodical, allowed a soft smile, a subtle acknowledgement of the extraordinary nature of what had just occurred. The story of Max's rescue had transformed Lily's declaration from innocent curiosity into profound insight. Sarah held Lily gently, explaining softly, "That's the dog who helped someone just like your friend." Lily's eyes widened, connecting the dots instinctively. She whispered, "He saved her." Sarah nodded, squeezing her daughter's hand. The child's admiration deepened, her voice quiet but earnest. "My hero." The repetition of her words, now contextualized with understanding, reinforced their weight in the minds of everyone present. A 3-year-old had recognized heroism, not through trophies or medals, but through observation, empathy, and a childlike comprehension of courage. Max's handler knelt beside him, stroking his back quietly, and whispered, "You've done well, boy." Max's dark eyes, calm yet intelligent, seemed to acknowledge the praise, though his focus remained on Lily. It was a rare moment of connection, bridging human and animal understanding in a courtroom filled with adults who were simultaneously witnesses to and participants in the unfolding drama. The officers shared subtle glances, each silently acknowledging that the impact of the child's words had surpassed any formal recognition Max could have received. The community's context added another layer to the moment. Max had become a quiet local hero, his story celebrated in news articles and neighborhood chatter. Children spoke of him with admiration, families praised his service, and even the adults who had witnessed his rescue marveled at his intelligence and bravery. Yet nothing compared to the simplicity and sincerity of a child's recognition. Lily's words had stripped away layers of formality and decoration, leaving only the raw truth. Bravery is noticed, and acknowledgement can come from the most unexpected sources. Spectators whispered again, now fully aware of the backstory. "That's the dog who rescued little Emma," a woman murmured. "And she's Lily's friend. No wonder she says that." The courtroom shifted, charged with emotion that blended admiration, gratitude, and awe. Adults who had come for legal matters now found themselves witnesses to something far more human, an interaction that transcended law and procedure, touching on the essence of courage and recognition. Max, trained to protect and serve, had become the symbol of those virtues, validated by the unfiltered perception of a child. Lily continued to study Max, her small hand hovering in the air, trembling slightly as if she wished to touch him again. She whispered softly, "You're so brave you saved someone." Sarah nodded, holding her daughter close, marveling at the depth of her observation. The officers allowed the moment to unfold naturally, understanding that the child's acknowledgement carried significance beyond protocol or command. Max, ever disciplined, remained calm but attentive, embodying the quiet strength that had made him a hero in the first place. The courtroom remained silent, the weight of understanding settling over everyone present. Witnesses shifted in their seats, lawyers paused mid-note, and even the judge allowed a moment of reflection. The story of Max's rescue had transformed the ordinary morning into a scene of profound emotional resonance. Here, bravery had been witnessed not only by those directly involved, but also by an innocent child whose recognition was as honest as it was powerful. Lily's words had elevated the dog's heroism into a shared moment of awe and reverence. As the proceedings continued, whispers persisted among the spectators. Some spoke quietly about the heroism they had just been reminded of, while others focused on the clarity and insight of a child barely 3 years old. The combination of Max's skill, the rescue's context, and Lily's observation created a tableau of admiration that extended beyond the courtroom walls. Even as legal arguments and case details resumed, the emotional resonance of the moment lingered, binding everyone present in a shared recognition of courage, innocence, and the quiet heroism that often goes unnoticed. Sarah held Lily gently, whispering, "You did something very special, honey." Lily's eyes sparkled, still focused on Max, her tiny voice repeating quietly, "My hero, my hero." The repetition wasn't redundant. It reinforced the sincerity and depth of her perception. Adults, officers, and spectators alike felt the weight of the moment, recognizing that acknowledgement of bravery does not require age, eloquence, or authority, only honesty and understanding. Max, still composed, allowed the moment to pass, yet the impact remained. The child's recognition had illuminated the quiet heroism of his actions, transforming them from reports in the local news to a living, breathing testament of courage in the courtroom. The officers, proud and humbled, shared subtle smiles, acknowledging the rare magic of the intersection between innocence and heroism. And for Lily, the experience was transformative in its simplicity, a direct, honest, and unforgettable connection with a real-life hero. The courtroom had shifted irrevocably. What had begun as a routine hearing had been enriched by a story of courage, recognition, and emotional truth. Lily's understanding, though expressed in a few simple words, elevated the significance of Max's heroism and reminded everyone present of the profound clarity that children can bring to moments of extraordinary courage. In the quiet aftermath of her observation, the courthouse felt transformed, forever carrying the echo of two small words that captured the essence of heroism and the innocence of admiration. The courtroom remained suspended in a delicate hush long after Lily's declaration, "My hero," had echoed through the room. What had been a routine morning of hearings had transformed into a living testament to courage, innocence, and the extraordinary power of acknowledgement. Every adult present, from the judge to the attending lawyers, spectators, and even the officers, felt the weight of that simple phrase. It was remarkable how two words, spoken by a 3-year-old, could ripple through a room packed with seasoned adults, stopping them in their tracks and filling the air with emotion that no formal procedure could replicate. Max remained poised, sitting obediently beside his handler, ears flicking subtly as he observed the room. The German Shepherd had been trained for obedience, protection, and heroism, but the officers now realized that they were witnessing a rare moment beyond training, a moment of genuine recognition, a silent bridge of understanding between a child and a heroic animal. Max tilted his head slightly, as if acknowledging Lily's words, his deep brown eyes calm yet intelligent, reflecting a quiet awareness that left the officers momentarily speechless. The judge, a man normally defined by structure, formality, and rule, allowed himself a small, genuine smile. His stern expression softened, and he leaned slightly forward in his chair, his gaze lingering on Lily. "That was remarkable," he said quietly, his voice carrying warmth instead of the usual austere authority. The room shifted subtly in response. The spectators sensed that this wasn't simply an acknowledgement of a dog, but a recognition of something more profound: courage, selflessness, and the unique clarity that only children often provide. Some of the lawyers exchanged glances, their pens paused mid-note. Even they, trained in logical arguments and legal precedent, felt the human impact of what had just occurred. Papers rustled softly, whispered conversations flitted across the benches, and eyes returned frequently to Lily, whose innocent focus never wavered. She remained perched on her mother's lap, small hands folded, eyes fixed on Max, completely unaware of the reverberations her words had caused. Sarah brushed a gentle hand across her daughter's hair, her own eyes misting slightly. "You know, honey, that was a very special thing you just did," she whispered softly so that only Lily could hear. Lily tilted her head, gazing at Max again, and whispered back, "He's brave like a hero." Sarah nodded, smiling, realizing that her child's understanding went deeper than admiration. Lily intuitively grasped the essence of bravery, even if she couldn't articulate it fully in adult terms. The officers who handled Max were equally moved. One, kneeling beside the dog, allowed a rare smile to break across his face. "He's done a lot of good," he said quietly to a colleague, "but I've never seen a reaction like that. She gets it, she really gets it." Max, attentive to the subtle emotions around him, remained still, though his tail wagged ever so slightly in acknowledgement. The bond between child and dog was tangible, a living demonstration of the kind of trust, admiration, and connection that defied words and procedure alike. Spectators began murmuring softly among themselves, their voices tinged with awe. "Did you hear that? A 3-year-old just recognized heroism better than anyone here," whispered one. "It's incredible," said another. The courtroom, which had been filled with formalities and legal procedures, now buzzed with a new kind of energy, one born of emotional resonance, communal understanding, and the recognition of something universally powerful, the acknowledgement of bravery. Lily, in her innocence, had shifted the entire atmosphere. Even children in the audience, who had been fidgeting and whispering before, became quiet, captivated by the scene. They leaned forward, whispering to each other, pointing at Max, and repeating Lily's words softly. "My hero, my hero." Adults watched this ripple effect with quiet fascination, recognizing the extraordinary clarity of a child's perspective. There was no pretense, no political or procedural bias, just pure acknowledgement, immediate and honest, directed towards someone who had earned it through courage and selflessness. The judge allowed a moment of silence to linger, almost as if giving everyone permission to process the emotions in the room. Then softly, he addressed the officers. "It's clear that Max has done more than serve the law. He's inspired, even in ways we never anticipated." The officers nodded in quiet agreement, aware that the courtroom had shifted from a site of procedural routine to a space that celebrated heroism in its simplest, purest form. Lily, sensing the attention she had garnered, leaned slightly closer to Max. She whispered under her breath again, "Good dog, you helped someone." Her words were unstructured and soft, yet their weight was undeniable. Max tilted his head, observing her with that same calm intelligence, as if understanding her intent in a way few humans could. It was a quiet exchange, a dialogue without language, bridging species and generations in a moment of shared understanding. Sarah squeezed her daughter's hand gently, realizing that the tiny interaction was profound beyond words. "You've just made a difference, honey," she said quietly. Lily nodded solemnly, absorbing the significance in her own way. For the officers, the spectators, and even the judge, the moment was a reminder of the simple, honest acknowledgement of courage that is often missing from the adult world. A world filled with awards, formal recognition, and public accolades, but rarely imbued with the unfiltered honesty of a child's admiration. Whispers continued to ripple across the courtroom as adults processed the significance. "That child, she just got it," one woman murmured. "Better than any of us could," another replied. Lawyers exchanged small smiles, appreciating the moment but still aware of the legal proceedings around them. Yet even as they returned to their documents, the emotional resonance of the moment lingered, infusing the entire room with a rare warmth and human connection. Max, disciplined as ever, allowed the attention to flow without reaction, yet the officers noticed subtle changes in his posture, an almost imperceptible relaxation, a quiet acknowledgement of the admiration directed toward him. For a dog trained to serve the law, this was a rare and special recognition. And for Lily, the experience was formative. She had witnessed real heroism, recognized it intuitively, and expressed it honestly. Two worlds, human and canine, innocence and courage, had intersected in a single, unforgettable moment. Even as the legal proceedings resumed in a more measured manner, the emotional resonance of the earlier moment lingered. Witnesses spoke, lawyers argued, and the judge presided with renewed awareness of the extraordinary human-animal connection that had been witnessed. Max remained a silent hero, while Lily's words echoed subtly in everyone's minds. For those present, the significance extended beyond the courtroom walls, carrying a reminder of courage, admiration, and the power of recognition in its simplest, most honest form. The spectators, many of whom had arrived expecting a mundane legal hearing, left with hearts lifted and minds stirred. They had witnessed an extraordinary exchange, a child's innocent acknowledgement and a hero dog's quiet reception. Lily, oblivious to the attention, continued to whisper softly to Max, her eyes filled with awe. The courtroom, forever changed, had become a space of shared humanity, bridging age, species, and understanding through a single, heartfelt moment. Sarah hugged her daughter, whispering, "You've seen something very special today." Lily, smiling faintly, pressed her tiny hand against Max's fur and whispered again, "You're my hero always." The words resonated, quiet yet powerful, reinforcing the bond between child and dog, innocence and bravery. Max remained calm but attentive, a living embodiment of courage, discipline, and quiet heroism recognized in the purest form possible. In the end, the emotional reactions, tears, smiles, soft whispers, and silent nods, were a collective acknowledgement of a truth that transcended law, procedure, and formality. Courage is timeless, and recognition can come from the most unexpected sources. Lily's words, though simple, had changed the courtroom forever, leaving a profound imprint on everyone present. Word of the courtroom moment spread quickly, though it started quietly, whispered among spectators and courthouse staff. By mid-afternoon, the story had reached local news outlets. A small article in the town's newspaper described how a 3-year-old girl had declared a police dog her hero in the middle of a hearing, capturing the hearts of everyone present. Headlines read with a gentle awe, "Toddler recognizes heroism. A dog, 2 words, and a courtroom forever changed." Social media buzzed with photos and comments from those who had witnessed the event, and even people who weren't in the courtroom felt the emotional impact of such a pure, honest acknowledgement. For the officers, the media attention was unexpected but welcomed. Max had always been a dedicated canine, trained for tracking, rescue, and protection. He had saved lives before, but the idea that a child had intuitively recognized his heroism gave them pause. One officer, speaking quietly to his partner, said, "We train them for courage, but sometimes you forget how it resonates outside the badge. Today it really hit home." Max, seemingly aware of the shift in attention, remained composed, his calm demeanor reassuring to both officers and onlookers. Back at home, Sarah and Lily watched coverage of the event unfold on television. Local news anchors spoke with reverence, replaying footage from the courtroom and highlighting the story of Max's earlier rescue of a lost child. Lily clutched her favorite stuffed animal while glancing at Max, who had become more than just a dog in her mind. He was the embodiment of bravery, loyalty, and quiet heroism. She whispered softly to her mother, "He's really my hero, Mommy. He helps people." Sarah smiled, realizing that the day's experience had left an imprint on her daughter that was deeper than mere fascination. It was an early lesson in courage and empathy. The community response was equally powerful. Parents brought their children to the police station to meet Max, hoping to share a connection similar to what Lily had expressed. Schoolchildren wrote letters praising the dog, and local businesses even displayed drawings and small notes acknowledging his heroism. Lily's declaration had turned a single courtroom moment into a town-wide story of admiration and respect. People of all ages began discussing bravery, heroism, and the ways in which small acts of courage could inspire others. Max became more than a law enforcement tool. He became a symbol of hope, loyalty, and the profound impact of recognizing courage, even in the smallest of hearts. Officers noted subtle changes in their interactions with the community. Parents would stop them to thank them personally, often mentioning the girl who had spoken 2 words in the courtroom. "Your dog inspired my child," one mother said. "It's amazing what they understood," another commented. The ripple effect of Lily's words demonstrated that recognition of bravery doesn't need grandeur. It only needs honesty, and the most unexpected moments often leave the deepest marks. Max's heroism, previously measured by formal metrics, had gained emotional validation that transcended awards or certificates. Lily herself became a quiet local celebrity. Children at her preschool whispered about her declaration, mimicking her words in play, while adults smiled knowingly. She didn't fully comprehend the attention, but she felt the admiration that surrounded her, especially when others visited the courthouse to see Max or meet her briefly. Her innocence and sincerity became a model for many, a reminder that clarity and honesty often carry more weight than years of experience or authority. 2 simple words had captured what speeches, ceremonies, or accolades often fail to convey: raw recognition of courage. The courtroom itself became a site of small pilgrimages. People would request permission to attend proceedings just to see Max and reflect on the story. Officers allowed brief tour for families, explaining the rigorous training K-9s undergo and recounting Max's past rescues. Lily, accompanied by Sarah, often watched from a quiet bench, repeating softly, "My hero, my hero." Each time, the phrase resonated differently depending on who heard it. For newcomers, it was a reminder of innocence. For those who had witnessed the original moment, it was an echo of emotional clarity that could not be replicated. Max, for his part, continued to perform his duties diligently. He accompanied officers on patrols, participated in search and rescue operations, and remained a model of discipline. Yet the small human acknowledgement in the courtroom seemed to have given him an aura, something beyond the training and routines. For the officers, every interaction became a subtle reminder of the bond between human and animal, of the ways in which recognition, especially from a child, can elevate the meaning of duty and heroism. Even within the legal community, the moment left an impression. Lawyers who had been focused solely on procedural details began to speak about the emotional impact of recognizing courage in unexpected ways. Courtroom staff shared stories with colleagues, recounting Lily's declaration with a mixture of amusement, awe, and quiet reverence. The judge occasionally referenced the moment in private conversations, calling it a rare example of pure, unfiltered acknowledgement that transcends age and authority. In a place defined by rules, decorum, and hierarchy, 2 words from a child had become a touchstone for understanding heroism at its most elemental. The media continued to cover the story for weeks. Articles highlighted not only Lily's declaration but Max's life of service, detailing rescues, patrols, and his remarkable intelligence. Parents and teachers used the story as a teaching tool, encouraging children to recognize courage, empathy, and the ways small acknowledgments can make a difference. Lily's story became a gentle reminder that heroism is not measured solely by medals or accolades, but by consistent acts of bravery and the recognition of those acts by those whose hearts are open enough to see them. Through it all, the bond between Lily and Max deepened. She visited him frequently, whispering words of praise, petting his fur, and watching him with unwavering admiration. Max responded with quiet attentiveness, allowing the child to express herself freely while maintaining his disciplined composure. For Sarah, these visits were a testament to the lessons of bravery, respect, and emotional clarity that her daughter had absorbed so naturally. Two beings, different in age, species, and experience, had connected in a way that left lasting ripples in their community. Finally, the story of Lily and Max reached beyond the town, shared on regional news broadcasts and local social media networks. The tale of the courtroom, the two words, and the quiet heroism of a dog captured imaginations across communities. People reflected on their own heroes, on those who perform courageous acts without fanfare, and on the power of children to recognize what adults often overlook. Lily had reminded the world in her small, powerful way that heroism is not defined by age, size, or circumstance. It is defined by action and acknowledgement. The ripple effects continued for months. Letters arrived at the police station praising Max, thank you notes came for the officers, and invitations were extended for Lily to visit schools and community events. Each interaction, while gentle and understated, reinforced the connection between courage, recognition, and innocence. Max had become a symbol of bravery and service, while Lily's words had become a symbol of the pure clarity that can illuminate acts of heroism. Together, they reminded everyone that even small gestures, two words, a gesture of admiration can create an enduring legacy of inspiration. Weeks passed, and the story of Lily and Max became a permanent fixture in the town's consciousness. The courtroom moment, the two words "my hero," had evolved from a fleeting incident into a symbol of courage, innocence, and connection. Families spoke of it over dinner, children repeated it in schools, and the local police station displayed a small plaque commemorating Max's service, and the day a 3-year-old reminded the town of the profound simplicity of recognition. The ripple effect of a child's words had grown into a lesson that transcended age, profession, and circumstance. For Lily, the experience became a touchstone in her young life. She didn't understand the magnitude of the attention, but she felt it in the way adults looked at her, and in the gentle warmth with which Max responded to her presence. Each visit to the police station became an adventure where she could see her hero in action, watch him demonstrate skills, and quietly offer praise. "Good dog, Max," she would whisper, her small hand stroking his fur. Max, ever disciplined and aware, allowed her closeness, his gentle eyes reflecting a bond built on trust, admiration, and mutual understanding. Sarah watched this relationship grow with a mixture of awe and quiet pride. She realized that Lily's natural empathy had created a bridge between human and animal, between innocence and courage. "You've learned something very important," Sarah whispered one day as Lily hugged Max after a demonstration. "Bravery isn't always about fighting. It's about helping, protecting, and caring for others." Lily nodded solemnly, her eyes reflecting the weight of understanding far beyond her years. Max remained still, sensing the gravity of the interaction, as if acknowledging that he too understood the importance of their shared lessons. The community continued to embrace the story, celebrating both the dog and the little girl who had recognized his heroism. Schools incorporated the tale into lessons about courage, empathy, and moral responsibility. Children were encouraged to recognize and appreciate acts of bravery, no matter how small or quiet. Parents used the story to teach about gratitude and the power of acknowledgement. "See, kids," one teacher explained, "even small words spoken honestly can have a huge impact." Lily's declaration became more than a courtroom anecdote. It became a tool for fostering compassion, respect, and understanding in the next generation. Local media revisited the story frequently, highlighting Max's ongoing service and the quiet heroism that extended beyond dramatic rescues. Features celebrated the relationship between Lily and Max, showcasing the pure, unfiltered admiration of a child and the steadfast, disciplined presence of a dog trained to serve. Sometimes, heroism doesn't need applause or recognition, a reporter explained on a local broadcast. It only needs acknowledgement from someone who sees it, understands it, and respects it. That's exactly what happened here, and it's a story we can all learn from. Even within the police department, the moment left a lasting impression. Officers reflected on the power of recognition, the lessons of empathy, and the human-animal bond that transcends daily routines. Max continued his duties with unwavering discipline, but he was now celebrated not only for his technical skills, but also for the inspiration he provided. Officers sometimes paused during patrols to think of Lily's words, reminding themselves that courage could be seen and appreciated in small, unexpected ways. The bond between child and dog had created a subtle shift in perspective that influenced even the most experienced officers. One afternoon, months after the courtroom moment, the department organized a small community event to honor Max and other K-9 officers. Families gathered, children played, and Lily stood quietly, holding her mother's hand. Max was front and center, his eyes bright and attentive. When asked to demonstrate his skills, he followed every instruction with precision, agility, and grace. Afterward, Lily stepped forward, whispering the now famous words once more, "My hero." The crowd laughed softly, some clapped, but everyone understood the deeper resonance of those words. They were more than a label, they were a celebration of courage, kindness, and recognition across generations. Sarah realized that the story had given her daughter an early, invaluable lesson in empathy and moral awareness. Lily's recognition of Max's bravery was a reminder that true understanding doesn't require age or experience. It requires honesty, observation, and the willingness to acknowledge what is admirable. "Remember, honey," Sarah said quietly as they left the event, "courage can be found everywhere, and when you see it, it's always right to honor it." Lily nodded thoughtfully, her gaze lingering on Max as he received a final pat from his handler. The event sparked further community initiatives. Schools began holding recognition days, where students could acknowledge peers, teachers, or community members who had demonstrated courage, kindness, or service. Families sent letters to officers, thanking them and their K-9 partners for acts of heroism. Local businesses donated supplies for the police department to honor their K-9 teams. The ripple effects of a single courtroom moment had extended into meaningful, tangible changes in the community, fostering a culture of gratitude and respect. For Max, life returned to its rhythm of duty, patrols, and training, but the essence of heroism now carried a deeper, almost intangible validation. Every visit from Lily reinforced the bond they shared, a connection that transcended words. To her, he was not just a dog. He was a symbol of bravery, protection, and unwavering loyalty. To him, she was a small yet powerful source of recognition and affection, a reminder that heroism is often best understood through the eyes of innocence. As the sun set on another day, Sarah watched her daughter whisper once more to Max, words that were now as much a part of their lives as any storybook or bedtime lullaby. "My hero, always my hero." Max responded with a gentle nuzzle, his calm demeanor reflecting the silent acknowledgement of understanding. In that moment, the human-animal bond was complete, a quiet testament to bravery, empathy, and the simple power of recognition. The courtroom, the community, and even the local media remembered the day Lily spoke those two words. They had witnessed more than a child's curiosity. They had witnessed the intersection of innocence, bravery, and human-animal connection in a way that resonated far beyond legal proceedings. The story became a permanent part of local lore, told and retold with reverence, inspiration, and joy. It reminded everyone that sometimes the smallest voices carry the most profound truths. Years later, Lily would recall the day vividly. She remembered the smell of the polished wood in the courtroom, the hushed whispers of adults, and the calm, unwavering gaze of Max. She remembered the warmth of his fur under her small hands, and the way the entire room had paused to honor the truth in her words. That day had taught her that courage can be recognized at any age, that heroism deserves acknowledgement, and that simple, honest words can create ripples of change far larger than one could imagine. For the town, the memory of the moment remained equally powerful. The story of Lily and Max became an emblem of hope, bravery, and the importance of seeing and honoring courage in everyday life. It was retold in classrooms, at community events, and among families, each retelling carrying forward the lesson that heroism, empathy, and recognition are timeless values, accessible to all, regardless of age or circumstance. And so, the tale of the 3-year-old girl, the heroic police dog, and the 2 words that stopped a courtroom continued to inspire generations. My hero had become more than a phrase. It had become a symbol of connection, courage, and the extraordinary power of seeing and honoring bravery in the world around us. Max remained a faithful guardian, Lily a witness to heroism, and the community forever transformed by a simple, unforgettable truth. Courage is always worth acknowledging, and sometimes it takes the pure perspective of a child to show us how.